I am so pleased to be sitting here with my friend Deval Sanghavi, who is the co-founder and managing director of Dasra. As the founder of the Global Fund for Children, I take great pride in the fact that we were one of the first clients of Dasra in their work nearly 18 years ago. We gave them their first contract to do work to support grassroots organizations in India supporting vulnerable children and youth. So let's get started. Deval, tell the audience your story. I think that's really wonderful to hear, and how that transformed into Dasra.
Definitely. First of all, I'm proud to say I'm also from Houston, and so thank you, Arun, for all the fantastic work that you guys have been doing there. I grew up in Houston, born and brought up there, went to university, went to Morgan Stanley in New York, and was sort of advising clients on how to look at sectors, vet management teams, be sort of active investors to turn around companies. So our biggest clients were private equity firms and leverage buyout shops, and that's where I met my partner and my wife, Neera, and both of us sort of kept thinking that the same sort of rigor and discipline that we used in making for-profit investments, if that could be transferred to nonprofit philanthropic giving, chances are you can create greater impact. So really changing the mind shift from this is what I do once a year at the end of December to save taxes, to how do I actually become an engaged, active contributor and solve some of the issues in front of us. And that really led to us to sort of move to India, start an organization that supports both organizations on the ground like Arun and others, and providing them the leadership skills, the managerial support, the funds, enabling them to scale, but then simultaneously being sort of a philanthropy advisor for some of the larger foundations, families, and the Global Fund for Children, of course, was one of the first groups that we started working with, sort of being their boots on the ground, enabling them to make more impactful decisions.
So, to this audience, explain what strategic philanthropy is.
So again, I think the issue with the nonprofit sector and the development sector is many times we feel as givers, the second we write a check, that itself is our job. And many times the nonprofits, once they receive the check, they also feel their job is done. And so for us, strategic philanthropy is, number one, changing the paradigm from just the giving and receiving to actually creating more ambitious goals that are solving sort of the root causes of poverty. And so to give you a sense, we provide quite a bit of research on the sector, helping donors and nonprofits understand what are, for example, the gaps in child marriage. So we'll evaluate 300 organizations, spend about 9 months going into the field, understanding which solutions are creating impact at scale, and then providing this knowledge and resources to both the investors and the investees, with really the goal of creating partnerships that start when the funds are dispersed, not ends when the funds are dispersed. So for us, being strategic with your philanthropy, number one is setting sort of more ambitious goals. In India, we have a deep amount of issues. Our own mission at Dasra is a vision of a transformed India where 1 billion thrive with dignity and equity. And when you're looking at that, you have to be strategic in your approach. You have to figure out what are the right solutions you want to back. You have to figure out how you can collaborate with others. And you have to really measure impact on the ground on a regular basis to ensure that you're sort of meeting the correct trend lines, enabling you to, for example, stop child marriage in the country.
So give us 2 or 3 examples of corporates or families that you've worked with to implement your work.
So after the Nirbhaya rape that happened in Delhi, we were very keen on providing some sort of spotlight towards the issue to engage more givers as well as receivers. And so we wrote a report on domestic violence. At that time, we realized in the Indian context, a woman is typically beaten 37 times before they actually reach out to the authorities. Sexual abuse is rampant in the households. And so if this is accepted in the home, unfortunately, it spills out to the streets, as we saw in that particular case. And so we started sort of doing this research with the support of USAID and others to really shine a spotlight on the issue and, more importantly, figure out what are the solutions that philanthropists can back. Very quickly, we were put in touch with the Azim Premji philanthropic initiatives, who use this report to support 5 or 6 organizations focusing on this particular issue. And we were always also able to bring different families across the country together, large business families, to also sort of join hands and scale initiatives within this particular space. I think post that, what we've been able to do is really look at creating an impact assessment framework for these organizations, as well as capacity building these groups and providing them managerial support to really work as a collective to solve this problem, both at a policy level as well as an implementation level. And so this is just an example of Azim Premji philanthropic initiatives and other families really coming together and rallying around a cause that they themselves realize they can't solve on their own.
Give us another example.
We worked quite closely in urban sanitation in 2011, in fact, before Prime Minister Modi had actually shown a spotlight and talked about Swachh Bharat. We realized that toilets in itself was leading to 1,600 children dying every single day. It was leading to women who would only use the restroom at 4 a.m. and tie cloth around their waist so they wouldn't have to use the restroom for the rest of the day, thereby really taking away their dignity. And so when we started sort of looking at this topic, we realized there, again, the focus many times was on the building of toilets versus what happens after the sludge in that toilet gets in. And so we've been focusing a lot of our attention on the fecal sludge management of it and ensuring that 92% of our current water base, for example, is contaminated by fecal matter. 600 million Indians need toilets. 600 million. And so for us, we started going deep into this issue. We started rallying around both nonprofits as well as givers, and most recently, alongside the Gates Foundation, we've been able to help these nonprofits showcase their work to the Indian government and pass for the first time ever a national fecal sludge policy at a national level, really focusing on treating the water and the waste in a more effective manner. And so I think that's really the sense that we get is, number one, if you want to be a giver, be an active giver. And number two, you cannot do this alone. Whether you're the Gates Foundation, who invest close to $1 billion a year in India, or you're the Premjis, who have committed $12.5 billion towards philanthropy in India, these individuals also realize you have to sort of have a collective. You have to work in unison with many other partners, and you have to sort of have more ambitious goals than what my $100, for example, can achieve.
So you're talking about large dollars, right? If I'm a philanthropist here in the United States, want to make an impact in India, want to come to Dasra, and I have $1 million to invest, how would you advise a philanthropist from the United States as to how they would use that $1 million philanthropically?
And so number one, all of the work we do is open source. So we have 70 research reports online that anyone can access. We work with about 250 organizations a year building leadership skills alongside, in fact, Harvard Business School and bringing their curriculum to the table. And so everything we do, you can access online free of cost. I think number two, though, when you're putting $1 million in, it's to realize that philanthropy and the mission that many organizations are undertaking take a long-term investment view. And so we actually have created a guide where we talk about what's happened with leading philanthropists both in India and globally in really creating a philanthropy roadmap, in creating your vision, creating your plan, ensuring that you're not sort of giving the $1 million at one go, because chances are you're only going to then sort of be a drop in that ocean versus looking at sustainable solutions. And so we'll guide the philanthropists in the process, number one, to really understand what area they care about. It could be, for example, education. About 80% of the funds that go into India are education focused. But then we help with those same funders to help them realize that, for example, the number one reason why girls drop out of school at the age of 12, 13, and 14 is lack of toilets. And so really saying if you care about education, it may not just be the teacher or the curriculum that's creating an impact, but really other underlying causes. And so helping these philanthropists see those underlying causes, match them up with phenomenal organizations that exist in the country, and then creating a collective for that funder so they too can leverage the support of Gates, Premji's, Tata Trust, and others, so they're not sort of fighting this battle alone.
So 2 last questions. So we have an incredible philanthropic tradition in the United States. We have the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Gateses, the Bezos, the Zuckerbergs now. What does that look like in India to you in just a sentence or two?
So,
do we have a Gates or a Zuckerberg? I mean, I guess you're talking about Premji, but...
So we have the Premji, we have the Nilakanis, we have the Pirumals. The last 3 years, we have had 27 Indians residing in India contributing 50,000 crores, so about $8.5 billion towards philanthropy. Bain & Company, a consulting firm, has actually created the State of Indian Philanthropy Report, which they look at certain trends year after year, and they've seen a 300% increase in giving in India since 2010. And so there's clearly an upside. I think the downside, again, is that we have 37% of our girls being married at the age of 13, 14, and 15. We have 600 million toilets that need to be built. We have minority groups and others that are not having a voice in what's being said in the country today. And so I think the challenges are daunting. At the same time, there's a real appetite for government, as well as these Indian philanthropists, to join hands with others, to bring in not just ideas, as was talked about yesterday, but also philanthropic capital to make this difference.
And I'd probably add Tata to that list, right? Sort of the father of philanthropy in India. I mean, their family, wouldn't you say?
Completely. They've been around for 125 years. They were the creators of sort of corporate social responsibility before that term was even created here in the West. And they give about $200 million a year. And what's great, I think, about the Tata Trust and other foundations now, they're really looking at joining hands with others. I think they themselves are also setting ambitious goals of attaining the Sustainable Development Goals, which India and every other country has sort of signed up to address. And they're looking for partners with open arms to leverage their backbone of boots on the ground, but working in conjunction with individuals here and outside.
So last question. If you can answer it in a sentence or two. If you were given a call tomorrow and said, Deval, Dasra has been given $1 billion to invest in India, what would you do with it? How would you invest it?
Being from the banking sector, albeit for a small period of time, I'm all about the multiplier effect and catalytic giving. And so for me, that $1 billion would go to strengthen the philanthropic ecosystem, enabling individuals here as well as in India to give more effectively. Because I think if you put $1 billion in leverage, for example, just the 50,000 crores in effective giving that's been given from 27 Indians in the last 3 years, or if you look forward, where now every quarter you have $100 million announcements of families sort of putting it towards charity. I think if you can help those groups be more collaborative, be more sort of consistent in their giving till at least 2030, and actually focus on some of the impact measures that are critical for those individuals on the ground, I think you could actually see that billion affect $50 to $100 billion worth of giving in the country.
Deval, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.